tiny nonprofit that helps promote nuclear energy education for the general public in the Northwest. First off, I want to thank Troy Kilburn and Old Stove Brewing and encourage folks to buy food and drink. They're hosting us for free. It's pretty awesome. Also, I want to share that we're recording this on our YouTube channel and encourage you to share it with your friends later. I want to thank our speakers for making the trip to Ballard. Representative Barnard of Washington's 8th Legislative District is ranking member of the House Technology, Economic Development, and Veterans Committee, and also sits on the House Environment and Energy Committee. Energy innovation is one of her top priorities. She founded and chairs the Legislative Nuclear Energy Caucus, founded the Western States Advanced Nuclear Consortium, and is a member of the National Conference of State Legislatures Nuclear Work Group. The Nuclear Energy Institute recently named her a 2026 champion for Washington State in this work. Senator Shoemake of Washington's 42nd Legislative District chairs the Senate Environment, Energy, and Technology Committee. Senator Shoemake also serves on the Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee and the Transportation Committee. Outside of the legislature, she's a professor of environmental economics, urban economics, and energy policy at Western Washington University. Senator Shoemake is a member of the legislature's bipartisan Nuclear Energy Caucus and is a sponsor and supporter of nuclear energy legislation, along with Representative Barnard. Madison Schrader, our moderator, is an assistant professor of American politics at DePaul University and a nuclear policy coordinator with Generation Atomic. And without any further ado, Madison, take it away.
All right. Thank you all for being here. Just to kind of give an outline of how this event will go, we have some pre-written questions for the legislators here, and then if you have any questions, we'll have a Q&A period at the end. So write them down on your phone, but if you have to ask it right away, just raise your hand. Just first question we'd like to ask is, how did you find yourself being a supporter or interested in nuclear energy? Take that mic.
Okay, first and foremost, before I answer that question, I just want to say thank you so much to Friends of Fission. I don't know how many of you are part of this group, but they have helped so much with the Washington State Legislature, the Nuclear Energy Caucus. They helped organize and put together a tour of Seattle and Everett for Vision and Fusion for legislators from all over the state of Washington, and it was exceptional. It made a big difference. So I'm just so grateful for every time you testified on behalf of a bill for nuclear. I'm just so grateful. So a little bit of my background story. I was born in Northwest Hospital here and raised in Mount Lake Terrace, and went to high school in Edmonds, and so grew up on this side of the state. And then after college, my husband at the time, his first job out of law school was in the Tri-Cities. And so, but I didn't know, I mean, I love it here. I didn't want to go. I said, fine, if you have to get your experience in Eastern Washington, I'll go, but maybe for a year or two, and then we're going to come right back. And I just had a hard time leaving family, my friends, everything that I had here. So I didn't really want to go, and one of the reasons that I used to say that I didn't want to go was Hanford. Why would I want to move over there and get down Winter, and right next to this nuclear mess that we've made, so to speak. And it really is a mess. I mean, it is a Superfund site. It's the nation's largest Superfund site for a reason. But as it turns out, when my husband ended up liking his job and thinking about establishing a home and building a family there, I thought, I've got to figure this out. I really don't want, you hear about the glow-in-the-dark insects and the three-eyed fish. There's actually a restaurant in the Tri-Cities called Three Eye Fish. It's actually really good, really good. But I got really nervous, and I thought I've got to look into this a little bit more. I really don't want to live there if it's this toxic. And I heard they had an active nuclear power plant, and I was just terrified. So I just did my own research. I mean, really, that's all it was, just self-interest, me going to the books, asking people that work there, looking at the history of Hanford, going to the Reach, which is a museum they have in the Tri-Cities, just to talk about the history of the Manhattan Project and the Department of Defense and weapons-grade plutonium production and the Cold War and all of the things that led to the state of where we're at today. And just really was able to see the difference between the nuclear waste from weapons-grade plutonium production and atomic bomb, and as well as what it looks like to generate clean, carbon-free nuclear power. So I was somewhat persuaded to stay when I saw the good work of cleanup going on at Hanford, and I was able to see that the Columbia Generating Station was doing great things and helping to decarbonize Washington. That's how I got started.
Hi. If you'd asked me, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago what I thought of nuclear power, it probably would have come from The Simpsons. I'm not sure I thought a whole lot about it, but I came here from concern about climate change, trying to figure out how we can decarbonize this whole economy. We're even still behind on the easier things, which is the electricity grid. And so we shouldn't be taking things off the table. I teach energy economics at Western Washington University, and the first quarter I taught it, I had my students do a project. I was like, okay, let's figure it out. And so before AI, you wanted to learn something about something, you could tell your students to write a paper on it and learn more about it. It was great. And so we did that, and we did some work on it, and we all kind of came to the conclusion that we're fine with it. Mostly the concerns were around the cost. Is what's going to be the impact of building that? So the histories of it hasn't always been great. And is it competing, but how does it compare to other options? So I think that some of the fears, and I will say Stephanie has been an incredible leader on this. She's really brought people together. She's brought an enthusiasm in. It's sometimes a difficult topic for Democrats to bring up because even though a lot of people may not care or they care a lot about climate change, you're always worried about losing a portion of your base. And for us, a lot of times that's environmentalists, and especially it's usually older environmentalists that have concerns about nuclear. And so Stephanie's really forced us to have those conversations. And I think when you are afraid of talking about something, you only, this happens in marriage too. Like when something's difficult to talk about, you don't talk about it and it doesn't get better. And so by forcing us to have these conversations, I think it's gotten better. And there are still some people that may not be out and proud nuclear supporters, but understand where it should fit in and that maybe opposition is no longer the environmental move to make.
I'll just, one more thing. My background is in economic development, and so that was my profession, and I was the government affairs director for the Tri-City Regional Chamber, which is one of the largest chambers in the state. And one of the projects that I was tasked with was doing a community project called My Tri 2030. And it was a 10-year community-driven project to really strategize about what our greatest opportunities were in the Tri-Cities and how to move that needle forward. So I engaged with every single part of our community, every single different church, every organization, every association, schools, as from junior high all the way up to WSU, PNNL, the National Laboratory, Bechtel, Battelle, Weyerhaeuser, all of the big organizations that are out there, just saying, hey, what do you think the biggest opportunity? What do you love about the Tri-Cities? What do you not like about the Tri-Cities? What do you think our biggest opportunities are for the Tri-Cities and in the Tri-Cities? And through that process, interviewed them, and what bubbled to the surface was the top two biggest opportunities for the Tri-Cities is number one, yes, agriculture. That's who we are. That's what we know. That's what defines us. We're living in the Tri-Cities is our ag. And number two was energy. We know nuclear. We are savvy about nuclear. We don't have the NIMBYism that exists in other places. So we just going through the motions of talking to the community in such depth to really see what was going to bubble up for us and what our economic opportunities were. That was number two, right after ag. So that's kind of how my passion started to really work towards an SMR. That's been a goal in the Tri-Cities for decades.
So we've started talking a little bit about the stakeholders in Washington. Where do you see most of the nuclear interest in Washington coming from? Is it constituents, industry, something else? And how does that shape the way a bill is written or its chances?
I'm going to have Stephanie speak on this because she knows a lot more about this. I think that there's kind of two big reasons why split nuclear. One, it should be part of the grid ideas, should be part of the conversation. But also, I think we really need bipartisan climate policy. When it shifts back and forth because someone different is, you're not going to make billions of dollars worth of investments if you don't know those tax credits aren't going to be there if the other party gets in. Like, these are long-term investments. And something I've noticed is Republicans like nuclear and they like hydrogen, and so I will join and have those conversations with them because we've got to figure out how to do this together. I also work in the climate agriculture space. Some of my favorite people are farmers who have an evangelical view, and I mean this not in a religious way, just in everyone needs to hear about this, of no-till agriculture. They will talk your head off. They are so passionate about it, and I want to figure out how to support them and bring them into the let's talk about climate, because the farmers are seeing those impacts too. So that's kind of the three areas where I've tried to make this more bipartisan.
What is no-till?
Oh, I can no-till, thank you. So traditional agriculture, you dig up the ground, you get rid of all the weeds, you plant your seeds in there, you cover it up, you usually have to put fertilizer on, some water, and you watch it grow. No-till says, let's not do that. Let's work with the soil ecology that's already there, and instead what we're going to do is we're going to drill seeds down. I'm messing this up. We're going to drill seeds down into the earth, and what we find is that it's actually a way of sequestering carbon. It's a way of reducing chemical inputs, and there's also some major air quality benefits, because when you're not tilling up the soil, you're not getting as much soil around. And so farmers see lower costs, and after a certain amount of time, they see higher yield. And so a lot of times what they do is they just leave the stubble on the field. And there's been this big question of like, why don't more farmers use no-till? And I'm not going to get to that much, but a big part of it tends to be it's the way I've always done it, is tilling the soil, and so I'm not willing to switch.
Okay, so let me see if I remember the question. So I think from my point of view, from the stakeholders that I worked with, number one, I'll just maybe help you get into the heads of Eastern Washington. And so to me, my biggest worry is that we don't have an economy. It's crazy to me that we have a really, really Republican area, really red, that's a government town. I mean, because it's created by the government. It's all funded by the government. We have like 5 cities, 5 different mayors, it's just like, it's so weird. The dynamic is bizarre because you have these big government agencies, organizations, associations, you have, and yet it is a little odd that, so when we go to get Hanford money, we have Patty Murray and Maria Cantwell to thank, right? I mean, and that employs tens of thousands of people in the Tri-Cities with really good paying jobs. So, and Hanford's our largest employer. So you think, we have, Melanie, how many people do we actually have working at Hanford? Do you know? Is it in the 15,000 range?
I don't know.
Okay, so I thought.
Sorry.
So she knows the Tri-Cities. So I think there's 12 to 15,000 employees at Hanford, at least 15. Okay. So, and we've been losing jobs, and the money has been getting harder and harder to get. We have a vitrification plant that took 25 years to build and billions of dollars to build, and it's now working and functional. And we also have grout that we could also use to, immobilize toxic waste. So the tank farms, that is, we are working on that. We have Tister that removes the cesium, the strontium, and all of the sludge or whatever the compound is. They're sending it over to the vitrification plant to get vitrified, and then that is getting shipped off to where, like Idaho or I think Utah is where we're sending it right now. So we are getting rid of it. We are cleaning up those tanks. Those tanks have leaked, and our biggest fear is the water. We don't want that to get into the Columbia River, and that's from, like I said, the time in our history when it was the Cold War and we were building up our nuclear weapons arsenal. So this is waste from the Manhattan Project that's been there for decades. So once that gets cleaned up, what are we going to do? What is our economy going to look like? If that billions of dollars in funding gets dried up, and we're done cleaning it up, which I don't think we're going to do for a while, but still, we have to look forward and say, how are we going to have an industry that is going to be big enough to come in and replace the money and the jobs that we've been getting from Hanford? How do you do that? You don't, unless it's something substantial. And we know nuclear. We have the institutional knowledge around nuclear. We have the workforce for nuclear. We have everything there that primed and ready for us to take the lead in that space. And the other side of that argument is, I don't think that there's a lot of us Republicans out there in Eastern Washington that we're not climate deniers. We're not, we love the environment, we care, we want clean air and clean water just the same as anybody else. I mean, there might be different language that we use, like stewardship over the earth, and that might be, but farmers truly are the original environmentalists, and they do care. They're not just throwing down anything, and they want the earth to be healthy. They want a good crop. They want a good yield. They are very committed to that, and so you have this dynamic where we really do care, and some of us care deeply about the environment and also the economy as well.
So we've covered a little bit of the stakeholders, those who have a nuclear interest in Washington, but I think as nuclear advocates, we are also aware of how sometimes it can be difficult to advocate for nuclear. What are some of the biggest hurdles pro-nuclear legislation faces today, and what strategies have you worked to overcome them? And as a bonus, if you have any strategies that you think that nuclear advocates can use, that would be great.
I think the biggest thing that nuclear advocates can do is writing their legislators and saying that we're pro-nuclear. A lot of us read our emails, we get yelled at when I've signed on to nuclear bills, and I get people who knock on doors for me and supported my campaign and being like, Sharon, I thought you were an environmentalist, how could you do this? I cut my teeth on anti-nuclear, and I write them back saying, I think times have changed. And I have enough credibility. I've devoted my life to working on environmental stuff. I have a PhD on environmental economics and I work on energy policy. I think if you are a legislator that closely works on childcare policy or education policy, it's harder to navigate that, right? It's harder to take a contrarian position. And so knowing that their constituents have their back is a really important thing to be doing right there.
It's easy for me, so I'm going to talk about Sharon. I think that it takes an incredible amount of political will and courage to do what she's done. And I honestly don't think she's received the props that she deserves for standing up for what she thinks that vision can do for our environment, and how it can decarbonize, desalinize our water, there's so many medical isotopes, and there's so many good things to nuclear that people just don't even consider. And I feel like Sharon, time and time again, will say, why not? Why not? So maybe the Sierra Club, I remember back in the day when they were on board completely with nuclear, loved it. Until a few things happened, you know? Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island, of course they're going to have they're going to second guess themselves and say, okay, we're going to rethink this. But that was 40 years ago, and those same talking points in Sierra Club 40 years ago are still being used today. And if you really do look into the history of 3 Mile Island especially, and nobody wants to talk about the engineering of Chernobyl, because that was horrific. But 3 Mile Island, nobody died. No one. Nuclear is the safest energy source in the world. I mean, and it's statistical. It's data. Don't believe me. Please don't believe me. Go out and research it for yourself. But to have someone as courageous as Sharon in working with her constituents, there's others that have been courageous as well, but I don't think anyone as much as Senator Shoemake, because she agreed and she said, listen, it's a conversation that I want to have. She still has questions. She still brings up the really, really important concerns that her constituents have. Safety and waste, safety and waste, safety and waste, every single time. But she feels comfortable enough now to say it's really just a money thing. So it does take someone that's not afraid to take a little flack, and I just think that says so much about her as a politician.
You're here.
So a few bills, nuclear bills, have come through the legislature in recent years. Where do you see the biggest issues still coming up? Maybe just for Democratic lawmakers, Republican lawmakers. What are still the major sticking points for bills, nuclear-related bills?
I think it's amorphous concerns about waste for the most part. A little bit of a safety reminder, but mostly about waste, not knowing what we're going to do with it, having all those questions about it. I saw a table a long time ago, and this is a little morbid, but it was like ways to increase your probability of death by 1 in a million. And it was like spending a year in Denver because you get more radiation, 3 minutes in a canoe, like stay out of canoes. It was something like 300 miles in a car and 500 years next to a nuclear power plant. And so it was just something that I feel like the safety stuff is definitely overblown. But we respond to big, scary, small probability events differently than we do when we get on the road every day. And that's probably the most dangerous thing I did today, was drive here from Bellingham on I-5. So I don't tell people that they're wrong. It's just sometimes when you put that in context of safety versus nuclear, or what my students really found was, I'd much rather live next to a nuclear power plant than a coal-fired power plant. That is an easy choice. We know the impacts of particulate matter on our body. We know that the mercury emissions, all of those pieces. I think now the more relevant case is coal is becoming less and less part of our energy mix, is kind of the viewshed costs of wind and solar. I like wind and solar. I would join that caucus too. I think we need more wind and solar. I think wind turbines are like oddly beautiful, the way they move. But I know not everyone agrees with me, and they face a lot of opposition when we place them. And one of the things that we've seen is sometimes even tribal nations start thinking, well, maybe we'd rather have nuclear than wind and solar, especially if it means we can remove one of the Snake River dams and have more salmon. So no energy is zero cost. There's trade-offs on all of them, and I think some of the trade-offs in nuclear are better trade-offs in certain situations. And that's what we should kind of remove the stigma and let the nerds figure it out, you know?
All right, what was the question?
The question was, we've seen several pieces of nuclear legislation in recent years in the state. What are some of still the sticking points, those major issues that get bills caught up?
Right, the word nuclear. When I first got elected, the very first thing I did before I even got to Olympia was I said I'm going to start a nuclear caucus. And the advice that I got was don't use the word nuclear. And I was like, no, look, we need to start saying it. Let's say it. Let's all say it together. Nuclear. I mean, it's okay. It's not bad. It's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. This isn't a bad word. This is a good word. This nuclear is saving lives. And I think, we have talking about decarbonization. Our nuclear fleet in the United States is removing 470 million metric tons of CO2. It's displaced that means you could take away 100 million passenger vehicles off the road. That's what it equals. It's equal to the emissions of that. 100 million passenger vehicles. That's how we're decarbonizing the nuclear. This is a critical part of our clean energy transformation and trying to reach those goals. I think that it's key. One of the key things that we need to do is we need to bring that bipartisan. And you already talked about this, Sharon. But one of the things for the nuclear caucus, and one of the things that you had told me early on was, let's get scientists, let's get economists, let's get professors, let's speak data, and that's it. We're not going to talk anecdotes. We're not going to get pitches from companies that want us to buy their product. We are actually going to talk about, and so from onset, one of the things that we worked on was making sure that the people that came in to speak to us were like former Secretary Ernest Moniz, who was Obama's Secretary of Energy, and then we had Carol Browner, who was energy czar for EPA, and we had. I would take pictures around. I remember the first couple of meetings, I would take pictures around of Obama and Carol Browner, and I'd be like, "Look, my Democrat friends, this is Carol Browner, and she supports nuclear power, and she's going to come and talk to us, talk to the legislators." And we didn't invite any lobbyists because we don't want a sales pitch. That's not what we're looking for. We don't want somebody to come and sell something to us. We want to hear from those that, and Ernest Moniz, I mean, I went to the Keynes conference this year at MIT, and he's like a god there. They love him. They look at his work with awe. He is a giant in the nuclear field and runs the MIT nuclear program. And some of the things that he talks about are it's really the environment, but because that's what his passion is. But it's the science and it's the data and it's let's talk facts. Let's talk about the economy and how what this means. And so it's the real deal. You're not getting fake news. That was probably a terrible thing to say. You're not getting the pitch. You're not getting the sales pitch. Is what I'm trying to say. So those are the kind of people that we make sure we brought into the nuclear caucus to do the teaching. Those lunch and learns really made a difference. The other thing that made a difference is we do 2 tours every interim. So we went to INL, the Idaho National Lab. We were able to see the projects that they're working on out there. We did the Seattle tour of fission and fusion. We have done every single year. We've done a tour. We did a tour one year to say, hey, he's going to keep an open mind on nuclear. Do you know how huge that is? That is so huge for the state of Washington. And one of the things that he did was during a bill this year that passed this year in this session on nuclear. First of all, we couldn't use the word nuclear. We had to change it to clean energy transformation projects. And for the NRC, we had to change that to the regulatory commission that oversees clean energy transformation projects. Yeah, that's what we did. That's what we did. I mean, how ridiculous is that? But it's true. It's like people go in and do searches of the word nuclear, and if they see it, they will, they will protest. They will come in and start to put pressure on their legislators to not vote for it. So the other thing that happened that was really unfortunate is that the Trump administration, this wasn't even the Trump administration, this came from the Advance Act that was passed during the Biden administration, but there was some changes made to, so DOE has some pilot projects going on at INL, and those pilot projects are like microreactors and small modular reactors that they go to INL, they can test them there. So you can go, if you have an idea for an SMR, a small modular reactor, you can take that technology to INL and try it out. And one of the things, and they have all the facilities there to do that. And one of the things that came out of the Advance Act was that they were going to update some of those regulations so that you could run a simulation, or you could work on a pilot project with a little bit less red tape, meaning a lot of duplicative bureaucracy, that applications to do this or that in the time frame, to shorten that down, to shorten that process down, so that we could see how this new technology was going to perform. But unfortunately, what got picked up was an article that came out. It was an NPR article that came out that said the Trump administration is changing nuclear to make it less safe with new regulations that came in the dark of night. And it was like, that's not true, but I can see how someone would see it that way if they didn't know anything about how nuclear projects advance in the United States. So there's just a major communication gap that we need to try to fill. And in one day, I lost every single Democrat nuclear supporter in the House of Representatives. Every single one, because of that one article. So at midnight, I get on the phone, and I know it's like 3 in the morning or 4, 3 in the morning on the East Coast, and I'm saying, I need somebody from DOE, I need a statement right now. We need to communicate this immediately, because we have a bill on the floor of the House, and I can't lose all my Democrat votes. This is not okay. So by an hour later, or no, not an hour later, by 4 a.m. I had a response from DOE. Bless their hearts. I'm glad I have one person that will answer their emails in the middle of the night. But I had a quote, I had some data, and I was able to send out an email to the House of Representatives, the Democrats that were in the Nuclear Energy Caucus and support nuclear, to say, hey, this came out of the Advance Act, this was under Biden, this wasn't the Trump thing, and this is what that actually, this is the change that actually makes. And slowly but surely, we got all of the same members that left. They eventually all came back and ended up supporting that bill in the end. So it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to stand on. I'm sorry I went on for too long about that.
Oh, that's great. It's actually
Inside baseball.
no. I mean, so the organization that I work with, Generation Atomic, we have dealt with that same issue in different states, the changes at the federal level, which is kind of killing support for a lot of these bills, and we're still working with communication about that right now. But for those who aren't super familiar, what is the Nuclear Caucus, and what's its goal? Who makes it up? How do you join? What, for those who are curious about, like, if their representatives are part of it, what is it?
Okay, so the Nuclear Caucus is an ad hoc caucus. This is not a statutory caucus. We don't get 1 single cent from taxpayers. It's something we just do on our own. Out of the goodness of our hearts. It's a lot of work, but it's made a huge difference in the Washington State Legislature. So what we do is we basically say, you do not have to put your name on paper that you are a member of this caucus. Why would we do that? Especially if you're in a district like Thurston County or where, even your county, where I know that you gladly put your name on this, but there's a lot of legislators that don't want to do that because they feel like they would. Exactly. So this is something that they want to support and they understand. And so basically we've said, listen, we're not going to ask you to vote yes on the slate of nuclear bills. We're not going to do that. We're not going to ask you to put your name down in writing in black and white so that somebody that can attack you for coming to this. All this is a lunch and learn. That's all it is. And we have a movie night too. Like we play Nuclear Now and people come eat hot dogs and eat popcorn and drink a beer. But that is, it's just an invite. We just invite people to learn more about nuclear. And if you go into it with the idea, like, if I was pontificating, let's say I was a nuclear engineer, I don't think the Nuclear Energy Caucus would have worked. I really don't. Because I go into this saying, hey, I need to learn as much as you. My son might be a nuclear engineer, but I'm not, and I don't know. So let's learn together. Let whoever you want to speak, we'll get them to speak. If there's concerns, let's bring up the concerns. Let's speak to those concerns. Who can we have come out here that's going to be able to really teach us the facts? And so it was just about learning together. That's all it was. And because of that, it really did open the door to legislation. We had those that were. I remember the first time I talked to Representative Stearns. It was at when we first get elected, you go in, they do a little training just to kind of tell you this is what to expect in the legislature, and you have to sit Republican, Democrat, and you have to work with your Democrat, somebody, and you have to talk to them and get to know them a little bit. And I was sitting right next to Representative Stearns. And I remember, I'm not going to use the words he used, but you were supposed to talk about what your goal was, what you were there for, like what was your top priority. And I said, an SMR, I want an SMR in Washington State, which is a small modular reactor. And he turned to me and said, I have, some choice words followed by 3 Mile Island. And then we became immediately fast friends. And he is a Navajo. And we met in his office to talk about his work. He worked for DOE actually for a time. And he worked with Dr. Moniz. He's the one that connected us with Dr. Moniz. And by the end of that first year, he called some of his friends back in DC. He called Katie Huff. Yeah, who said it? Thank you, whoever said that. Katie Huff. He called Katie Huff, talked to people in DC, and by the end of that year, he was pro-nuclear. No joke. So it was really, really cool. Our friendship we bonded over that, and he has sponsored and passed, and he was the one in the House that sponsored the $25 million budget proviso that is going to the X-Energy, the XE100 project on Site 1. So, really cool.
I would say the general question about caucuses is they're kind of a way of creating interest groups and kind of learning communities. I work on environmental stuff, but there's a reason I sit on transportation. There's a lot of emissions. There's a lot of environmental impacts. I'm also in agriculture because I care a lot about natural resources. For a while I was on housing because that determines how much we need to drive, where we build our homes. Local government also has a lot of environmental pieces to it. And so you can't be on all the committees on your area. And so we kind of informally will have networks. And I was thinking about some of the caucuses we have. I mean, there's like the House Democratic Caucus, the Republican Democratic Caucus. Those are like the official ones where there's particular staff and resources put on them. Same on the Senate. There's a few that still have like a staff member. Like I was thinking the Members of Color Caucus has a staff member. There's probably some others, but SciTech doesn't have a staff member. That's just an informal. We had for a while in the House. We were trying to get food policy, so like lunches for kids and community eligibility, and help people out with that. We had a food fighters caucus, public safety caucus. I just love bikes, and so for a while I got some bike pins, and I was like, you're part of the bike caucus now. If they like maybe rode their bike or said they like bikes. It wasn't like a hard barrier, and it was just a pin. You guys, if I had some, I could give you guys pins and you could be part of the caucus. But they're informal learning communities, and they're ways for us to kind of come up with strategies around the bills, which is really great because one of the things I've learned in my 8 years in the legislature is nobody does anything alone, not anything cool. Everything takes a group of people in different places, collaboration. Humans are the wimpiest of animals. We don't have big teeth, we don't have sharp claws, like we don't even have fur everywhere. But we're able to talk to each other and we're able to coordinate, and that's how we take over the world. And so that's also what you want to do, I think, in every job I've ever had. But that is especially true in politics, which is the most people-centered job I've ever had. And I'm a teacher, so it's especially a lot.
So I want to open it up for Q&A, but I have one more question. If there's one thing that you wish people knew about the political process itself, what is it? It's a big black box for a lot of people.
Yeah, I have people in my community saying, "What's taking you so long?" Like, I really do. I really do. And they're saying, "Well, I need to run because you're not getting it done." And I'm like, "Okay, all right." I don't know what to say to that because I've given every ounce of my soul to try to move nuclear in the state legislature, but it's, that they just have no idea how much work it is to just move the needle a little inch, and we are making huge amounts of progress. I mean, this nuclear renaissance, or whatever you want to call it, even if it's not that, it is happening. And data centers, and there is so much misunderstanding. I see it as an opportunity. A lot of people see it as a crisis. It is a crisis, actually, an energy crisis. Now, how are we going to meet demand? Where is that going to come from? Are we okay with brownouts and blackouts? Is that how many lives do we need to lose from brownouts and blackouts before we recognize that, I love renewable energy. I absolutely do. If you look at the footprint for how much land it takes to generate the same amount of power from a 5-acre SMR to 60 to 100,000 acres of wind, the footprint alone, just the land that it needs to be used, and then the capacity factor is wind is not always going to blow. So 30% of the time, you're going to be getting some good generation, right? But the rest of the time, you're not, because the wind's not blowing. Capacity factor for a nuclear power plant is in the 90%. The only thing that cuts that capacity factor is when you have to go in and change the fuel. And that happens once every 18 months, if that. These advanced reactors don't ever have to stop because they're, pebble bed reactors or fast reactors or something where you don't even have to stop to refuel. It's like a bubblegum machine. You just put in little bubblegum balls and it just goes right in. It just fires right up and stays for as long as you keep putting the bubble in. So that, I know, maybe that didn't make sense. Did that make sense? Okay, so the fuel is, there you go. Anyway, not quite sure what I'm getting at there, but
That it's harder than you think.
it's harder than you think.
I think this was so much fun. When we look at the land from wind and solar, I'm sorry, I just have to. It's like less than what we used to make meat. So every energy has a cost. Like it's a cost that we're willing to pay for burgers and meats. And I'm not a vegetarian. Like these are decisions that we make, right? And so we need them all. I am an accidental politician. I feel like maybe someone winning in 2016 told women they aren't qualified to run for office, even if you didn't think you were. And I found out my state representatives and my state senator were like on the climate denial fringe. And I was just like, man, you're getting that wrong. What else are you getting wrong in Olympia? Because it's so hard to see what they're doing down there. And so I was not expecting to win. But nobody else was going to do it. I'd only lived in my community for 5 years, and I was like, well, that's unreasonable. But my husband had quit his job to take care of the kids, because I love my job. I had just gotten tenure, and professors have summers off. It's where we get everything done, actually, but whatever. And I thought that this was an interesting time to get to know my community, and I'd knock a whole bunch of doors, and like meet people I wouldn't otherwise meet, and then lose, and then go back to being a full-time professor. My students encouraged me to do it. It was $500 to put my name in. I was like, I can do that. And so when I first met Frank Chop, who was the Speaker of the House, that at the time he was like, he has this big mustache. He's like, we didn't know about you. And I was like, well, I didn't know who you were either. I really didn't know anything at the time. I won, and I was like, shoot, what do I do now? And so I've always been interested in government. I didn't know much about my state and local government. And the barriers are much lower than what you think they are. Like, we are not that fancy. It was much harder to get a PhD than it was to run for office and win. I've done, it's harder to, raise a 3-year-old, you know? I spent a summer doing it. I had to get nicer clothes. And a lot of the skills that you use in your everyday life, I mean, politicians are some of the most normal, but also some of the weirdest people I know. I think a lot of our worlds, I mostly know college professors. I didn't really know firefighters and policemen and farmers and all of these other jobs that I meet all the time in the legislature. We have such interesting colleagues. The one thing that unites us, well, there's 2 things. One is we can all give a rousing speech, even the really quiet ones. It's a wild thing. The other thing is that everyone cares about people. And that is from the most conservative to the most liberal. We are in it because we care about people. We care about making the world a better place, and we are devoted to public service. And if you're here now, I would argue you're one of us. You may not be able to give a speech on everything yet, but I couldn't at the time either. And so you have a lot in common with our jobs. You just haven't been traumatized by it yet. And so when you want to talk to a politician and really convince them of something, you can try arguments, but a lot of times we're just a little cautious when someone comes up to us because we don't know what they're going to say or who they are or if they share values with us. And so I think the first thing that you want to do with a politician is convince them that you share values with them. Because when I know someone shares a value or they're not trying to sell me something, then I'm more open to what they're going to say. And I bet all of y'all are too. They've done social science research on how people form opinions, and I do this with students every year. I ask them to name all the Supreme Court justices. They never get it. And they're people pretty interested in public policy. We form opinions based on who are the elites and what are their opinions. If you're a Republican, you go to Fox News, maybe not Stephanie, she's more moderate. I don't know, I won't get you unelected. If you're a Democrat, I go to NPR. And so we listen to those elites and we listen to those opinions, and I'm like, well, Michelle Obama thinks that I don't know that much about criminal justice. That's probably right. And so those community members are really helpful for us in forming those opinions, especially in areas where we don't know a whole lot. I don't know a whole lot about our child welfare system. I know what my values are. I want kids to be taken well care of. I want every single kid to have an advantage. And I'm okay if we spend a little bit of money on this. I think that is a good investment. The details of it, man, I don't know. Leave that up to the chair of that committee. And so when you're coming to your legislator or you're coming to the chair of a committee that you want to influence, you got to convince them that you share their values and that you have some sort of new information that they haven't seen. And something else that people told me to do in Olympia is listen. You got 2 ears and 1 mouth in proportion for a reason. Listen twice as much as you talk, because we've probably heard it before. Maybe not, maybe you have some insight that you've really seen, but really listen to your legislator and ask them questions and say, well, what do you think about what I just said? You will get a better response and you will get better engagement because people talk at us so much that honestly, it's sometimes I just shift my weight from one foot to the other so I don't die of boredom. Like, not that most people are boring. I think most people are actually like very, very interesting to me. But you just get talked at so much, and you hear the same talking points over and over again. And so, in an email saying like, I'm passionate about vision, it should be part of the solution. I'm a big environmentalist and a Democrat. I am passionate about vision, it should be part of the solution. I don't want to see those stupid wind turbines up in my community to the Republicans. Like, those are kind of like, you want to know your audience, but then you want to convince them, I share your values. This is what comes from those values and the information and the experiences that I've had in my life. And that's what I think is really effective.
I'm conservative, I'm really conservative.
I'd like to open it up for Q&A. We do have some mics. I don't know if they're still going to work. We've been talking for an hour. So if they don't, I'll hear you and I'll repeat it for the recording. Here, we'll start here. See if we can get the mics to work. I'll repeat the question. Did you have a question?
I have a question and a statement.
Okay.
I mean, I hear you talk about the state government and the government and the government and the government. We live in a state that can we just chased $1 billion company out of the state of Washington, going to Montana to open up a business. I live in the county of Columbus. We just outlawed all data, not big data centers, all data centers. I also spend time in Sunstone, the biggest solar farm in America. Why is it located on the south side of Washington side? I spent a lot of time in Eastern Washington, and I see manufacturing for and what are those people doing? Across the state in Idaho, there are thousands of Washington licenses in the state of Idaho and Montana. The state of Washington, and we look at the federal government, right? The Biden administration had $50 billion to build the bridge. The money disappeared. Ensign for $1 billion and built a mass, and Philip Ensign took $1 billion and built a power grid from Colorado.
Do you have a question? Sorry.
Okay, my question is, why don't we talk more about what industry and commerce is doing instead of just the bureaucracy of Washington? Because all of us here know about the bureaucracy of Washington. What are you seeing industry doing?
So the question is, what are we seeing industry doing outside of what government bureaucracy is doing?
Okay, so I see industry wanting to come to where there is the workforce, the institutional knowledge, and all the resources. If we're talking about, are we talking about nuclear, the nuclear industry? Or any, okay, all right. Well, I mean, we're here to talk about nuclear, so I will. So let's just say components. If you need nuclear components, and you know of a metallurgy company that wants to come to Washington State because they know that we have the potential of having a large nuclear industry. Let's say, I know a company, just like what you're talking about. They want to come to Washington State. There are things that make Washington State a really desirable place to come because we already have those things. We already have that part of the workforce. We already nobody in Eastern Washington, well, not nobody, I can't say nobody, but the majority of the people in Eastern Washington really support the nuclear industry. So I'm just going to talk specifically about nuclear, but say you have a $1 billion company, metallurgy, that wants to come in and start manufacturing components for nuclear power plants to sell all over the world. That's hundreds of billions of dollars to put into the economy for Washington State. That is going to provide 500 to 1,000 prevailing wage, family wage jobs, and pump a ton of money into the economy. So this is a good thing. So we have to look at this from economic development standpoint and say, okay, how do we incentivize companies like this to come to Washington? Well, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why they would say, okay, well, with this tax on millionaires. This might not work well for our company because they have a high value and dollars that people are making, and so they say, okay, what would offset that? And we do have some things. There are some incentives that can offset those things. For me, I wish there wasn't a millionaire's tax. I wish there wasn't an income tax, but we don't have the numbers for that. We can't change that. I can't change that. I can talk about it. I can talk to my counterparts about it and say, hey, this doesn't make much sense, or why are we doing this or that? But really, it's about what do we have that will still help them, this company, decide to come to Washington State. And that looks like tax incentives. It looks like a good, high quality of life. It looks like good schools and colleges and things like that, and benefits. So you have to say, I love Washington State. There's no state in the union that I love more than Washington's my state. I will stand up for it as the best state in the country as long as I live, because that's how much I love it. Does it have problems? Absolutely. Yes, it does. And do I wish some things were different? Absolutely, yes, I do. But for the most part, this is an incredible place to have a business, run a business. We do need to be more business friendly. We need to provide opportunities, and so that we can be more competitive in that area. Yes, we can do a hell of a lot better than we've done, but we are still bringing in companies. They are still looking to us, especially in the nuclear space. Fuel assembly manufacturing, components, reactors, everything having to do with nuclear power. We have the ability to be multi-billion dollar part of the industry in Eastern Washington or anywhere in Washington if we go nuclear.
I will say there are definitely people in this state and in our legislature and in our political body that think that businesses shouldn't make so much money and we should just spend all the money on whatever. I do think they're the minority. I don't think that they have enough power to really control things, and that I think in both the kind of pragmatic Democrat caucus, and which is not an official caucus by any means, we have a majority of people that know that businesses are how we build housing and provide jobs and clean, food and all these things that are important to us. I think what we're talking about as regulation is because this is what Stephanie and I know. We are not nuclear engineers or developers. You can have that talk later. I'd be happy to come to it. But I think that what happens when you don't have any rules is that something bad happens. One of the bad actors, like, what we're seeing with lettuce right now. Nobody's eating lettuce because one farm screwed up. We are having these problems with nuclear because a long time ago, some nuclear power engineers screwed up with bad designs. And so now that entire program has the stigma. I think what is happening with data centers right now is some businesses have been bad actors, frankly, and we had a bill this last session to try and put some bounds, saying, okay, if you're gonna bring a data center in, you need to make sure that you're not increasing the power rates for grandma. You need to make sure that you are clear about the impacts on water. You need to be an asset to the grid instead of offloading those costs on others. You need to be making sure that you're not damaging the air quality. And you need to make sure that you're not offloading the risk of, could this be a bubble? Could you go out of power and then leave the other ratepayers with paying off the infrastructure costs that we built? The data centers fought it. It ended up dying at a tragic death. I think there'll be something back there. And the idea is to make sure that data centers, they have the ability to be this asset to our grid. Our utilities are very conservative when they're building new technology, as they should be. They are talking about grandma's ability to pay for her power. And so who's going to bring in the risky money and try the things that are hard to do, like an SMR? Data centers have a ton of money. They're innovative companies. I want them working on our grid, but we've got to have a set of rules in place that protect the environment, that protect people, that protect your grandma, that protect the aluminum smelter that already has a bunch of jobs down the road, and protects the things that make us love Washington State. And so sometimes bureaucracy has outlived its use. I think a lot of our housing policy, that is true. We mandated that people could only build single-family homes places, and then we're like, hey, how come we don't have enough housing? I don't know, man. And so we had to change a lot of that, and I think we are there too in looking at the nuclear policy as well.
One more piece is siting and permitting. We didn't really bring that up, except a little bit, and that's been a huge, huge problem. So siting and permitting, yes, we do need to get rid of duplicative processes. We do need to look at our transmission and say, okay, if we can put up some transmission lines that are superconductors that could add capacity to our grid, why wouldn't we do that? Why wouldn't we do that? So we need to have common sense regulation, and I think that sometimes it's not. So we need to work on that too. Just make sure it makes sense and that it doesn't stop. I know Energize East Side took 17 years to build 15 miles of transmission. That is just, we can't do that. We need the transmission now.
Yes, good question, yeah.
What are the bills you're trying to pass the next legislative session?
What are the bills you're looking to pursue next legislative session?
Okay, well, I just had a meeting today, and I don't want to really put it out there quite yet. It's being mulled over at this point and stakeholdering the bill. But let me just put it this way: we're trying to help incentivize industry to invest in nuclear projects. What does that look like? Well, it could take many forms. We'll just have to wait and see. So we're trying to, again, incentivize investors to invest in new nuclear projects. And that we're just trying to see what that looks like and we have a couple of different options, but I think there's some good ones out there. I think that last year, Rep. Rammel had a bill that included geothermal and in the sales and use tax break for those projects, and I don't know why we can't add nuclear to that. So because it's and I like renewables, I like wind and solar. I brought that up for the footprint piece, but the reason why is because our renewables are getting these the sales and tax use incentive, exemption incentive, and I think we should have this. And now that geothermal has that same incentive, why not add nuclear to that, right? So that makes sense too. And then the other, there's another bill that I had last year that came. Had a little glitch in the House where people just didn't read it, and that just means that I need to work harder. It was a state strategy for advanced nuclear to add it to CETA, Clean Energy Transformation Act. Just how does an advanced nuclear state strategy fit into CETA? Basically, the Clean Energy Transformation Act. We need to look at add nuclear when we're looking through the clean energy transformation lens. We need to look at nuclear too, and we do. It is included in the Clean Energy Transformation Act, but it's called non-emitting generation. And so we need to just say, okay, let's call it what it is, and develop a state strategy for advanced nuclear, just like we've done for renewables. And just like we're trying to do for hydrogen or geothermal or anything else, let's add nuclear to that and add it to our state strategy. So that bill didn't really go anywhere last year because people thought the bill was the strategy. But the bill was to create a strategy. The bill wasn't the strategy. It was a bill to create an advance. So I need to do a better job of pitching my own bill because there were several legislators that misunderstood that and took it for something that it wasn't, and so it kind of died in the House before it ever had a chance to go to the Senate. I also have a bill for the renewable energy credits, which I think it would be very beneficial for investors to come in and say, all right, well, if there's renewable energy credits that we can earn for investing, why not nuclear energy credits? Could we do that? Or clean energy credits? instead of just, renewable. We could advance nuclear. I think we have a ways to go on that one because I think they're afraid of diluting the credits for renewables, and so I think we have a ways to go on. But I'm going to try those other three and see where we get.
Stay tuned. Yes, right here in the green.
So I worked at Hanford for 2 years and I'm a mechanical engineer, and I know the two largest sticking points for nuclear energy are public's information on it and the amount of cost to build infrastructure and the safety regulations in that. Have any actions been put in to either educate the public or identify already in place infrastructure to build nuclear sites?
So just for the recording, the question was, have there been any movements or bills or anything like that to increase public education about nuclear, or the second part?
Any already in place infrastructure in order to build nuclear power plants?
Or any in-place infrastructure?
Okay, good question. Just existing infrastructure. I'll talk about infrastructure first, just because there's not much there. So we have, whoops. I mean, that is part of our history, sadly. And people think, okay, well, we got 80% done, and we had so much invested in that, and then we had Chernobyl. And Carter was like, we're done here. No more investing in this Washington power system, none of it. We're not having any of it. And so that all got shut down, but some of the structures still exist. We're unable to use existing structures in Washington state at least, but there is infrastructure in other states that they are using and they are reviving and they are bringing back into power. But I can't really speak to that because I'm not a legislator in other states, but I think the one place we are taking advantage of is FFTF, which is the radio isotopes for medical use. That building has been purchased by General Matter, and they are enriching uranium. I'm super excited about it. It's not a done deal yet, but they do have the keys to that facility, and just because they want to recycle or reuse facilities that we've had in use prior, I think that goes a long way, especially in Washington State. We're all about, hey, if you have something, if you have a resource, use it. Don't just let it sit there and decay. And they're actually using that FMEF for that radioisotope potential, and also for General Matter to enrich uranium. So it's really exciting. And then the other part of the question is what?
Are there any initiatives to improve the public education about nuclear that you're aware of?
Oh, you know what? How great would that be? Like I went to Utah I wanted to see Valor Atomics, who built a microreactor in a year. I was blown away by that. So I went to Salt Lake, I rented a car, I drove 3.5 hours to Orangeville, and they gave me a tour of Valor Atomics. And basically, they got that done in a year. They built that microreactor in a year, and it reached criticality. And they not only reached criticality, but they were powering a super chip, an NVIDIA super chip. And I was blown away by that. How did they do that? And oh my gosh, I lost my train of thought. Why did I bring up NVIDIA?
Public education.
So I'm driving down I-15. So I-15 is the major artery in Utah, and they have this project called Operation Gigawatt in Utah. They're all in for nuclear. Washington State is so much better fitted and uniquely qualified for advanced nuclear than Utah. We're way ahead of them, but they are sprinting and catching up with us, and it makes me sad. But one of the things you'll see on the side of the road are these billboards. I don't like billboards, but they have invested in billboards that you'll go down I-15 and it'll say like, it'll have a little bag of potato chips, and it says, a nuclear worker gets less REM than if you ate this bag of potato chips. And then you go down the road another 10 miles, and they have another billboard on the other side of the road, and it says, it has like a banana. It has a little banana on the billboard, and it says, you get more REM by eating this banana than a nuclear worker, that works in a nuclear plant.
Who
And-
pays for these billboards?
And it is a state state money. They just, because they're going nuclear, because they want that industry in Utah, they are paying to educate the public, and it's right down their main artery. And I went to the Keynes conference at MIT, like I mentioned before, and one of the things they talked about was there somewhere, someone knows this, I bet, there is an organization that takes a wooden reactor and they put up this SMR in like a park, and it's basically like a reactor, and it has little plaques, and your kids can play in it and go. It's kind of a walking tour, and it's just outside in a public park, and it just gets different communities ready to. Hey, what is this structure? They walk out there, and it's kind of like, oh, this is a boiling water reactor. And you go out there, and it's made out of wood, and it tells you, okay, this is the turbine, this is the what they use to generate the heat, so this is the fuel assembly, and this is what creates it heats the water, it creates the steam, it spins the turbine, it generates the power that goes on the grid. And it's just simple. I mean, it's pretty simple. It's not the simplicity is what makes it so beautiful, is that you look at it and you're like, oh, that's not that big of a deal. And so it's really cool. And I think that so many places are doing these types of things, and we're just not. Sadly.
Before Stephanie told me about those billboards, I was going to say, I think the government coming and saying nuclear is not so bad, I'm the government, believe me, would be a terrible idea of communication. But I do like those billboards. I think generally learning more science education is a good thing. I think nuclear kind of fits into that. But I think a real opportunity is actually to hear from other citizens. You got a bunch of people that know a lot more about nuclear than I will ever learn in this room. And I would encourage you to write letters to the editor and have citizen-to-citizen communication that I think is probably, first of all, I think the people that are really, really angry about nuclear are becoming more and more of a minority. And so having these voices of giving social permission to be pro-nuclear or comfortable with nuclear is important. But also they should be hearing from their friends and neighbors and not the government.
Yes, we had a question in the back.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that one of the best things we could do is to write a letter to our legislator. So we know Jamie Peterson is dragging his heels, so he's an obvious choice. But who are 2 or 3 other names in Washington that we could write to?
Who are 2 or 3 other names of legislators we could write to that would, be good targets for some nuclear strikes?
I will say that when people write my office, if I want to take their opinion seriously, maybe they have outside expertise, but usually what I do is I go to the end and I say, oh, they live in Linden, I should listen, that's in my district. So I think it's most important that you write the legislator from your district and you just say, hey, my name is so-and-so, I live in your district, and then your address comes and you send it through the website to find your legislator, so that's a great way to do it. And then just say, I am pro-nuclear because I care about these values. Those are the most important people to listen to. When people from her district email me, I'm like, delete.
We have way too many emails to read, and I don't read the ones that are outside my district either. There's just too many. I can't keep up. But the one thing I would say is, if it was me writing that letter, I would say, thank you. I would say thank you for keeping an open mind about nuclear. I would not go attack dog. It just doesn't work. And I think it does the exact opposite. You just dig in your heels. And so it's really important to just say, hey, I heard that there's a legislator in my district that supports advanced nuclear, and I think that it's amazing, and I'm so grateful. And hey, I just wanted to say if you did want to email Jamie and have him take it well, I think it would be something like, thanks for giving space in the Senate for this vote. If you want to see how your legislator voted on a nuclear bill, just look up, and this is a weird bill to look up, So maybe but the most recent nuclear bill that passed is 1210, House Bill 1210. And if you look at that, the dynamics of it, the reason why that bill it passed because of the Democrats, not in spite of the Democrats, but the Democrats actually passed that bill, and that was my bill.
What number?
1210, House Bill 1210. So if you look at the vote, there's a lot of Republicans that voted no on that bill. And that's fine. That was fine with me because it had a project labor agreement. So because it's unions, right? So a project labor agreement is that you will use union labor in the build out of these projects, which it's never not been the case. It's always been labor. I mean, it's at least at Hanford, it's always labor that gets these contracts. So I didn't have a problem with it personally, and I'm a conservative Republican, but the Republicans had a problem with my bill because of that. So then you say, okay, well then there's the Democrats that don't like nuclear, but they do like labor, and they want labor to have the jobs. So it's really hard to decipher. But if you look at the House Republicans that did not vote in support of that bill, the House Democrats, that did not vote in support of that bill, they're the ones that are anti-nuclear, and the same thing in the Senate. So that's an easy way. I just wouldn't count the Republican no's because I think every single one of them was because of the project labor agreement. The no's on that. But I'm so grateful to the Democrats for having the wherewithal. And they were the ones that really did pass it. I met with a senator that said that she would work that bill on the Senate side, and of course Sharon did too. But it was courageous. Every single person that voted yes on that bill was courageous, because you were going to get it one way or the other. So that has to tell you something about where nuclear is in Washington State. Number one, we have the votes. We absolutely, unequivocally have the votes to pass nuclear bills. It just takes political will and courage. And the people that voted yes on the bill had it. Because, again, you could get attacked either way.
So we have time for one more question. I know you had your hand up. Do you still want? Yeah.
I guess one thing that I wanted to see on is SMRs are the hottest topic right now, and we know that technology develops faster than regulation. So, yes, what is the plan now to, educate people on SMRs? Are they actually it'll be 5 to 10 years before they're actually in production. So what's the plan, on SMRs in Washington?
I think it's
Yes. Microphone works. The question was: there's been a lot of discussion around SMRs. Obviously, a lot of attention given to it in the public and with legislation. So, have there been any plans regarding SMRs, especially considering they probably won't be in production in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, okay, so there is a MOU between X Energy and Amazon. Am I saying that right? Okay, so Energy Northwest signed an MOU with Amazon and X Energy. They are going to work together to build this small modular reactor. It's called an XE100. And right now in Texas, it was called the ARDP money. It's a demonstration project, and DP stands for demonstration projects. And the federal government, under President Biden, had $3 billion that they put towards this ARDP funding, and they selected two different technologies. One was the TerraPower Natrium reactor, which is Bill Gates, and the other one is X Energy, and that's the XE100. So there are two different technologies, and the federal government gave $3 billion. That's $1.5 billion apiece for each of those projects. Now, I wanted that project to land in Washington State. I was like hell-bent on getting that project in Richmond, Washington. But we did not have the political will at the time to make that happen. But it went instead to Texas. because Dow Chemical came in and said we need high heat processing, and so they said, all right, well, this is a good fit, and we're going to take that on. So you have a first of its kind, which is always most expensive, but the safety features and the passive features that are so, like the safety and the waste for X-Energy, that X-Energy project is perfect for Washington State because they use, number one, they use triso fuel, which is self-contained in a pebble, and they're little tiny granulars, like the size of a piece of sand, and they coat that in they coat it with graphite and other materials so that it's not going to melt down. It's safe. It's so safe. You could throw it into an active volcano and it's not going to melt down. And the reactor itself is walk-away safe. So if you lost power, or if there was a hurricane, or if something happened in the river, the Columbia River washed it out, no melt, nothing. Walk-away safe. Even if we lost all the power, and even if the pebble, the triso fuel was exploded, not going to melt down. So it has these safety features, and plus it's that, the gumball thing machine I was telling you about earlier. This X-Energy reactor is the gumball where you can take the pebble and you can put it back in. You can continue to use that energy until it's gone. And so they have. It just makes so much sense for Washington. You don't have some of those same concerns like the waste and the safety features. So, but what you do have is you have expense because it's first of a kind. First of a kind of anything is super, super expensive. And we know from Vogel, which is the AP1000s, which is we only have two kind of reactors in the United States in our fleet of 98 reactors in our fleet in the United States. And they're either a boiling water reactor or a pressurized water reactor. And I think of it as, I'm a mom, so I think of it as like boiling water on my stove or a pressure cooker. It's like that's kind of the technology it is. You're just trying to make heat to produce steam to spin a turbine. That's all it is. And it's the atoms, colliding that makes that fission happen. And so you just have to have a way to stop it, a way to keep it cool, and you're good. You're golden. So all the technologies are different. Like some people use, I know the Natrium reactor, the Bill Gates reactor, TerraPower, that is a golden salt reactor. They use helium, not the helium that you suck in or put in it. That's probably not what you should do. But like this, but you put into a balloon and it rises. It's a different kind. But the technologies are all different. But the United States has invested in two different types. Those two are, taking a little bit longer than we would have hoped, but they're breaking ground at TerraPower. They've broken ground for the X-Energy project in Texas. We, Washington State, would be a fast follower. And a fast follower, you're still going to have those hills and valleys of any kind of first or second or third of its kind until you get an nth of a kind, and then you're going to start saving a lot of money, a lot of time, and that's where the modularity kicks in. So if you're modular, it's about duplicating what you've already done, right? You already know what your, where the supply chain is. You already got that under control. You have your factory. You just need to start duplicating, and then you can say, okay, well, Alaska, they need 80 megawatts in Sitka or some place far out there, and we say, okay, we start to fill order books. And that's when the price really significantly drops. And so we need to get to that place first, but we have to invest, we have to put the money into these new technologies in order to really get to that modular and that factory duplication type phase. And once we do, it's not that far down the road. I think of Valor Atomics, who built a microreactor in a year. And it's not just critical, it's producing energy, it's producing power in a year. How many gigawatts is what? Oh, the one for the microchip is just for the microchip. The one producing for duplication is 5 megawatts. So really, it's pretty small. But say it's same as ALO, and that's in Alaska right now too. Go ahead.
What about containment?
Containment as far as the radiation?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so of course, you have to have containment,
Yeah.
and that's just part of the build out.
Yeah.
That's a really important part of the build out. But really, to me, and so many people have different opinions on this, but a deep geological repository, I don't think makes sense, because you can take that spent fuel, or used fuel is what they're calling it now, and you can actually recycle it.
But fission versus fusion. I mean,
Oh, fission versus fusion's
Yeah.
great. It's just they're not even close to commercialization yet.
when
So-
do you think they'll actually have that?
Well, let's see. I mean, first we need to have the fusion produce more energy than it uses to create, and
Yeah.
we're not there yet.
It's the $1 million question.
It's the
Well,
it's
yeah.
$1 billion.
That's why
$1 trillion
I asked
question.
containment, because
Yeah.
containment, you're going to have so many repositories and you have all this stored. But the energy that you're actually going to use, like, well, how long do we have before that's actually filled up? And then you have to keep dumping sites to sites to
You don't
sites.
need to keep dumping.
You don't?
We every single ounce of waste from our nuclear fleet in the United States it can fill a football field. That's
Really?
it. But at least we know where it is. It's in dry cask storage above ground. The nuclear waste you're referring to
Yeah.
is the kind that we need those deep geological repositories for, the tank waste
Yeah.
from the Hanford and
Yep.
from the Manhattan Project. That type
That's
of
what I'm
waste.
accustomed to, so that's why
Yeah.
I'm
So,
asking.
but you do need containment measures, definitely super important. And a lot of people do believe that a deep geological repository makes sense. Like Finland is building their they are building their own deep geological repository because that's the law in Finland.
How did they do that?
What do you mean?
How did they come from that point where they were before to the point they are now? With repositories and storage.
Right. Oh, yeah. So, well, there's different types of reactors, but basically you can take the nuclear waste from the reactor, and you can put it down in a deep geological repository. But there's value in that spent fuel, because not all of the fuel is spent.
Yeah.
So you're just gonna have to take it back out anyway.
Right.
So why not just keep it in dry cask storage?
Oh yeah.
So I mean, to me, that's what makes sense.
Oh yeah.
But they're not doing that for one reason or another, and
But I was saying, how did they do that?
how did they do that?
Yeah.
Like politically, how do they get to
No,
that?
like scientifically, how did they do that?
There's also some really incredible. There's like a mini documentary about the process and how like they developed, came to, and like scientifically developed the deep geological repository and weighing it against different waste storage options.
Right.
Really, what it comes down to, I think, for most countries, is just political will, priorities, economics, and then future planning. So it just depends on
So anatomically, you have no answer.
And
to what.
Like how they actually physically did it from a physiological spectrum.
No, I think no. I do have an answer. I just think for the space and for the conversation that we're having, I think it'd
Oh
be better
no, you're good. I was
different
curious.
resource.
right. No,
To look for the resources.
I mean, it's okay. I think if you want to put it in a repository, I'm fine with that
I
too.
was curious.
I'm fine, because to me, it's all about the heat. It's not about the. You don't have to use your spent fuel if you don't want to. You don't have to recycle it if you don't want to. Put it in the ground, let it cool off, and you're golden.
No,
it
you're
goes
good.
back to
I'll leave.
ore.
I was curious.
No. First, we don't want you to leave.
No.
We don't want you to leave. I thought your question was
okay.
good. Okay. That's okay.
So I think that we answered most of the questions in the room, but yeah. I think we just want to give a round of applause for our legislators for coming. It's a tricky topic, and really happy for all the questions and comments.
I just want to add that Friends of Fission, along with Generation Atomic, we try and bird out the legislation. So if you want to hear about it, so that you can contact your representatives, sign up on the sign-up sheet at the table there, and come January, we will get whatever information we can out to you in pending legislation.
Thank you so much for coming. This is a great conversation.
No, I was gonna say, I have a random question for the both of them. When they're at INL, did they go to like year B1 when they're there? Just kind of curious. Oh, so,